Hello and welcome to the Muscle Engineer podcast. I am your host, Sodak Andrei, and this is episode 11 in which I'm joined by Melody Schoenfeld for a science-based objective analysis of the vegan diet and lifestyle. Melody is a certified strength and conditioning specialist with the NSCA, certified nutrition specialist, certified massage therapist, and a personal trainer with over 20 years of experience in the field. She also holds a master's degree in health psychology and writes and speaks both nationally and internationally on a wide variety of health and fitness subjects. She has held state and American records in all three lifts in powerlifting and competes in powerlifting and strongman. In addition to these feats, she is a heavy metal musician and a vegan, and she has been one for over 20 years. And she is also the recent author of the book Pleasure Not Meeting You, a science-based approach to the vegan lifestyle, and some recipes too. During our conversation, we both express our dislike for the most common emotional blackmailing approach vegans take when trying to convince meat eaters to abandon animal foods and offer a better approach, discuss some of the most common misconceptions about vegan diets, and address the most common nutrients vegans can be deficient in, plus much more. Make sure to stick around until the end if you want to hear what were my top 3 takeaways from this episode. So let's not waste any more time and start episode 11 of the Muscle Engineer podcast with Melody Schoenfeld. Melody Schoenfeld, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you were able to join me today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we get into any of the main topic that I want to discuss today, can you give a bit of background on you? When did you get involved with fitness? Because fitness seems to be a family business, given that you have a brother that knows a thing or two about fitness and has published a study or two.
My brother actually is the one who got me into it. I did not grow up athletic at all. That was not done in my family. It was more like, well, if you were one of the boys, yeah, maybe you would go play a sport or something, but it wasn't something that you were supposed to aim to excel at or anything like that. And really the thing that you're supposed to do in my family is you're supposed to go to Harvard and then you're supposed to have children, and that's what you do. You become a doctor or a lawyer, you have a family, and those are the things that you do. Or you could be an investment banker. I guess that would be okay too. But I did not follow any of those routes. I'm a musician, and that's what I wanted to do. But, it's pretty hard to become a musician. So I did everything else. I was a teacher, and I learned that I didn't want to be a teacher. And then I worked for an advertising firm. And then what did I do after that? Oh yeah, I worked for a law firm for a short time, and then I worked for an architecture firm for a short time, and then I was a computer consultant for 5 years. But basically, when I got out of college and I was working as an advertising person, I was making not a lot of money at all, barely enough to get by in New York. New York is very, very expensive. And my brother had a personal training studio, and so he let me work there. And I didn't know what I was doing. I'd played around in the gym a little bit, but I really didn't know what I was doing. So he showed me the exercises and wrote the plans, and all I had to do was dictate the plans to the client based on what he told me. But I didn't really feel right about doing that and then not, walking the walk. So I started following various of the plans that he'd written. I started following those for myself. And sometimes I would go to the gym with him and kind of follow him around and be annoying. But that's how I got into it. And then I figured that was the only job that I'd had up until then where I really felt like I was helping other people and not just helping rich people get richer. And that's what I've always wanted to do with my life. Other than, music, I really just wanted to help people, help animals, things like that. So I kept doing it no matter what else I was doing. With all these other jobs I had, I was still training on the side. I just really enjoyed it. And then, September 11th happened, and it really made me kind of reevaluate my life. And at that time, I was a computer consultant, and about 5,000 of us got laid off at that time. And I happened to be dating someone who lived in Los Angeles at the time, and I was living in Chicago at that time. And so I decided, let me move to Los Angeles and let me give this personal training thing a go. So that's when I went into it full time, and I haven't looked back since.
Interesting story, and
Thanks.
it seems like you had your fair share at experiencing a ton of different things, and it seems like you found what you really like, and that's awesome.
I do. I'm really lucky because I also am still a musician. I sing in bands and everything, so I get to do all the things I love. So I'm pretty darn lucky.
So when did you decide to adopt a meat-free diet? And I intentionally call it meat-free because I'm not sure if you're a full-fledged vegetarian, or do you eat any sort of animal products or none at all?
No, I'm a strict vegan, so I don't even eat honey.
I messed those
really.
terms up, right?
Right, yeah, I don't do eggs, I don't do dairy, I don't do honey. Honey is one of those things that, like, if I find out it's in my food, I'm not going to be terribly upset about it, but I don't, like, actively seek it out. But, everything else is, I'm pretty strict. And I've been that way since 2000. And that was because at that time, I met some vegans, and I really didn't understand anything about it. And to me, it was like, I understood vegetarian. Like, I got that, okay, if you don't eat meat, because I'd been slowly kind of going that way anyways. Like, ever since I was a little kid, I've been a huge animal lover. So when I was like 5, I figured out that the lobsters in the tank were the ones that go on your plate. And so I never wanted any more kind of shellfish looking thing after that. Although I still would eat shrimp. I guess for some reason it didn't associate shrimp with it. But, anything that looked like a lobster or a crab or anything like that, I just stopped eating. And then when I was in college, I stopped eating chicken. Red meat. Yeah, I stopped eating red meat in grade school because we did like one of those field trips to one of those kind of mock 18th century villages. And in that little kind of museum village that we went to, there was a mock butcher shop, and there was a cow hanging up to dry outside. And that was it for me. I stopped eating red meat after that. And then in college, I just realized I hadn't eaten chicken in 2 months, and I wasn't trying not to, so I just stopped eating chicken. And everything else I was still doing. I was still doing some types of fish and shrimp, and then I was still doing eggs and a lot of eggs and cheese. And I met these vegans, and I didn't really get it because you don't kill the cow, to get the milk, and you don't, in my mind, and you don't kill that chicken to get the egg. And so what they said to me was, well, why don't you do some research and let us know what you come up with? And that was really the best thing they could have said to me, because if they had just been like, look at this picture of a bloody cow, or something like that, that is a big turnoff to me. And I'd always been turned off to veganism because of that mentality where they're just shoving, horrible video and pictures in your face. And while that stuff is completely a valid argument as far as I'm concerned, it was a big turnoff. And it made me feel like I was a bad person because I wasn't eating like them. And I didn't feel like I was a bad person. And I feel like if you want somebody to think the way that you think, or if you want to convince somebody of your mindset, the worst thing you can do is try and make them feel bad about themselves for feeling the way that they feel, or to imply that they are a lesser person than you or a worse person than you, because they're not. They're just, they have their own mindset and you have your mindset. And then, sometimes a little education can go a long way. And for me, the best thing they could have said to me was do your own research. And so that's what I did. And I started looking up things, and I realized that, how closely related the dairy industry and the egg industry were to the meat industry. And I realized that I just couldn't live with my morality anymore and still eat what I was eating. So I just went vegan at that point.
There's a lot I want to touch on from there. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on specifically, because like you mentioned, you don't have this aggressive attitude, I guess I can call it, against other people who are not sharing your views and the nutritional approach.
Well, I wrote a blog post about it not very long ago because it was bothering me so much, the stupidity that I saw in the attitudes. Not only, there's a lot of vegans with bad attitudes, but it's not just from the vegans, it's from the other side too. There's just some really just hostile, just nasty stuff. But, the fact of the matter is a lot of vegans trying to get a message out there are doing it really poorly. and they're doing it in a way that turns people off. And they're doing it in a way that they're spreading misinformation as well, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book that I wrote, is because there's just a lot of bad information out there on both sides. But it was really getting to me. And the post that I wrote kind of went viral a little bit. And I think part of why it went viral was because there were so many people who weren't vegans who were like, see, vegans, you're doing things wrong, and you're, this is a vegan saying this. And, I think there is some, haha, you did it wrong in there, which, okay. But at the same time, at least I got the message out that I was trying to get out.
Right. So I wanted to address this a bit later, but we can just tackle it right now. So instead of this common, I called it emotional blackmailing, because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
What would be the better approach if you were trying to convince, wouldn't be the best term, but simply expose them to what your perspective is?
Yeah. I mean, look, if you try to scare somebody into doing something, they may do what you want, but it's not going to last. If you try to scare somebody into being a vegan, like this documentary that came out, What the Health, the whole thing about it was trying to terrify people into becoming vegan, and it freaking worked. A lot of people became vegan because of that movie. I don't think it's a good thing. Number one, because I don't believe in spreading misinformation, but also because when you try to spread propaganda and convert people based on fear, it's not sustainable. And what happens is all these people go vegan and they have no idea what they're doing. And so they do it in a way that is potentially going to make them quite sick, or do it in a way that they're just going to get tired of it. It's kind of like going on a diet. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this for the month of January and then I'm done, that kind of thing. So I don't feel like they're creating a sustainable vegan base based on this movie. And I feel like they're doing it in a way that's very, very underhanded. So I think a better way is just to use the science that's out there. There is science out there. There's not enough of it, but there is. And, don't try to cherry pick the science. I think, that happens a lot. Both ends is where people cherry pick things to try to prove a point. The China study is something that did that. And that's something that a lot of vegans are very proud of, the China study. And, granted, the China study is a great base of science. There's a lot of science that they did, but they cherry picked it. And so you end up with, we're going to show you the stuff we want you to see in order to make you think the way we think. And so I take issue with that. So I am a big believer in evidence-based, but not cherry-picked knowledge, if that makes sense. So when I wrote my book, what I did was I had the science, and then I gave it to people who were not vegan, like Jose Antonio and to Mike Israel. I gave it to them and had them read it over and tell me if I was on the right track. And they gave me whatever edits they were going to give me, and that was that. And that's one of the reasons why Mike wrote the foreword for my book, is because he had read it already.
This peer reviewing process by Mike and Jose must have been excellent, because both of them are far from what we would be considered a vegan.
Exactly. And they're also very well known in the nutrition world. So they're very high level and have a lot of knowledge. And, although they may or may not agree with my lifestyle, they can tell me whether or not my science is good.
Yeah, for sure. So before we go into any more details, I think it would be useful to clarify the difference between the vegans, vegetarians, because initially I think I messed up because I said you were a full-fledged vegetarian, which it's not the...
Well, I am, but I'm like a vegetarian plus. Vegetarians generally do dairy and eggs, and vegans do not. So that's the difference. And vegans are, as a general rule, we're going to avoid leather or, any animal-based products for, as much as possible. So the idea is to avoid as much as possible. Obviously, there's only so much you can do, and you have to draw your line somewhere. And everybody tries to argue with me, whoa, what about this? What about that? Look, you have to draw your line somewhere. So if somebody starts saying, well, why do you drive your car? And why do you have tires? Because those have animal parts. Look, there's only so much you can do, and I'm doing a hell of a lot as far as one individual can do. So I have my line. Other people may not use tires or their car, and they have their line. So, telling people and trying to shove that in their face is kind of, it's irritating and a little bit ridiculous. But in any case, my line is I try like heck not to eat or consume or wear any animal products as much as possible. And, if I get a car, I don't get leather sheets. If I get furniture, it's not leather, stuff like that. There is, a little bit of a debate in my head over leather versus pleather, because a lot of the non-leather, non-animal, the PVC leathers, because I'm a heavy metal
Polyurethane.
musician. Yeah, exactly. I'm a heavy metal musician, and so I wear a lot of that stuff on stage. But it's really bad for the environment. So, it's, but then so is a lot of the processing for leather as well. So that's always an argument in my head, which is going to be worse, But I just, as a general rule, just stay away from the animal product.
And there are a lot of variations, if I can call them such. Some include eggs, some include fish, some include...
Yeah, there's vegetarians who don't eat dairy but do eat eggs. There's vegetarians who don't eat eggs but do eat dairy. But none of those would be called vegan, because if you're vegan, you don't eat any of that stuff.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
So I want to make a distinction between plant-based diets and vegetarian, or rather vegan diets, because this is something that honestly irks me a bit, because whenever someone brings up a plant-based diet, they automatically talk about a vegan diet, whereas meat eater can have a plant-based diet, because you can have a diet made of 90% plants and have some meat. Or on the other side, and I know people like that personally who are vegans and hardly consume any plants. So
well, plant-based diet is got such a loose definition, doesn't it? So that's that's something that I don't even know that people have a technical definition for at this point. I don't know that people have agreed on what that is. But to me, if you eat a lot of vegetables, you can say you have a plant-based diet, I guess,
Yeah, for sure. And I think the people that you've previously, mentioned, who were just scared and just shift to this eating style, they automatically think that if they just avoid red meat, well, then all of their health problems are solved, and then they start eating simply all kinds of junk and crap foods that are simply... don't have any animal products, but they can still have a lot of sugar and processed oils and all that stuff.
Totally. Oreos are vegan.
So what are the main concerns associated with the vegan diet, or what are the main, if you talk about simply from an objective point of view, the ethical, the economical, and maybe the environmental considerations? And I think the ethical ones are a bit subjective, because you can't really tell to anyone what their views should be. So I guess maybe the environmental ones would be the most relevant for everyone.
Yeah, there is a fair amount of research now that shows that, the meat industry is one of the most detrimental things to the environment right now. Even just the land that's been cleared to feed livestock is tremendous. And, the methane gas, and there's just a lot of problems, and the amount of water that is used and that kind of thing. And it's kind of ironic that California has a huge portion of the farmland in America. A lot of the cattle and things like that are raised here. And then a lot of our land is used for alfalfa. And a lot of that alfalfa is not used for even this country. A lot of the alfalfa is shipped to China and other countries. And it's kind of ridiculous, because California is constantly in a drought. But we create most of the food for our country and for other countries as well. So, if it's been kind of proven in a lot of scientific studies that if people would even just cut down their meat intake significantly, it would do a lot of good for the environment. So, you don't even necessarily have to go vegan, just cut down, and it makes a huge difference.
And I think that's mainly red meat, right?
Any meat, really, because we are overfishing. And, while chicken and poultry is better than red meat for the environment, it's still, it's not as good as vegetables. So, same thing, if you cut out red meat and ate chicken and fish, that would be great. If you cut out chicken, even better. If you cut out fish, fantastic, because we are overfishing. And so that needs to be done sustainably, and it's just not. But the way that we're currently running our agricultural world, it's not sustainable for the environment. And so one of the better ways to kind of help is to at least cut down on particularly red meat, but also other types of meat.
Yeah, I'll have to be honest. I haven't looked all that deeply into this environmental issue. I've seen some random articles and stuff saying that, actually red meat isn't all that bad, but intuitively. Yeah, I would probably agree. And even personally, I don't eat a whole lot of red meat because it's just expensive. And honestly, I'm fine with that. So would be fine even if it became just kind of a luxury food because, well, shit, I don't eat caviar or however you pronounce that. So it is what it is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And, I think there's going to be some science that says that it's not that bad, but most of what's out there says otherwise, So I'm just going with the majority right now.
Sure. So this question actually was asked by someone in a group. So when they mentioned economical concerns, I guess what they meant is whether a vegan diet would be cheaper or more expensive than a traditional diet, I guess.
In my experience, it's cheaper, but it really depends how you do it because you can make anything expensive. I tend to shop at much higher end stores, and so that's automatically going to make it more expensive. But I also grow a lot of my own food in my garden, and so that helps save money to some degree. But then again, the process of gardening can be expensive as well, depending how you do it. But, you can also buy food at I have one friend who gets almost all, I don't know if you have anything like this in your country, but in my country we have these things called dollar stores where everything in the store costs $1. And I have a vegan friend who buys almost all of his produce exclusively from the dollar store, and he has a cookbook out too, and his food is fantastic. So he does his on a pretty strict budget, and he does really well with it. So it really just depends how you do it.
Interesting. We have things like that. At least we used to have them, but they were usually just secondhand clothes. So
they used to be places where you would just find to buy crap, but they've become bigger and bigger, and so now they have produce and all kinds of things that you can get pretty good deals on. So you can do quite well on a budget as a vegan. You just have to know what to buy or where to buy it. Are you in Romania? I thought you were in Hungary.
No, I'm in Romania. Yeah, I'm Hungarian.
Oh, that's cool. My family comes from Romania.
Really? I think I've seen Brad mention something about him having Romanian origins, but that's very cool.
Yeah, my grandparents, my grandfather and grandmother, and I think a couple on my mom's side as well came from Romania.
Very cool. Yeah, I actually hope that one day I can organize a fitness conference or something and have Brad on to talk about muscle hypertrophy, but it's gonna be a while since, you are kind of a bit behind with the science. Anyway, so what do you think about the false claims? And we've already mentioned What the Health and the China study. False claims that are being made, and these essentially false infographics that are being created just as a means to pursue someone that is not a vegan into being a vegan.
Like I said, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in trying to shove your agenda down people's throats using half-truths. I believe in giving people good information and letting them make their decision based on that.
And would you agree that they are actively harming the vegan community? Because that's my opinion, honestly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're harming the community the same way that the low-carb people are harming the nutrition industry. It's not necessarily like you can do it. There's nothing wrong with it, but at least tell the truth about it. I'm not gonna put down low carb, but I am gonna say that a lot of the low carb people are like, no, you have to, if you drink coconut oil, it's gonna make you lose weight, things like that. And no, no, that's not true. And at least, if you're going to do that, give people the facts so they can make better choices. Don't give them bad information. And that goes for anything, really.
I think it's sad because I'm a bit more open-minded, but let's say someone who's a hardcore meat eater, when they see a false claim, like, it's kind of a joke when, like, a car dealer trying to sell me into buying a BMW or something, and they would be using a lie. Or if I found out about it, I would never buy a BMW again, just for the sake of it.
I'm in a kind of an interesting position in that I have a foot in the fitness and strength community, I have a foot in the heavy metal community, and I have a foot in the vegan community. And the way that information is being put out by a lot of vegans, they're a joke to the rest of the world, it seems like. I mean, people are constantly putting down veganism, putting down vegans and things like that. Some of it has to do with food bias. Some of it has to do with if you're like the mentality that if you don't eat meat, you're somehow less of a person. But there's also just because people in the vegan community have been so aggressive
and poorly
aggressive that it's turned people off. And I think that's a huge problem. I'm trying very hard to change that.
I'm not sure about the you're a lesser man. Like that's ridiculous, honestly, objectively speaking. But the other part, yeah. Like, do you know the old joke that how do you know if someone is a vegan? They tell you.
Yeah, and it's so dumb because there's so many of us who aren't like that. But, we're not very loud. So
There's that YouTuber, the vegan gains guy, who was just attacking everyone. Yeah.
don't even get me started on that. And that guy and the freaking, what's she, the banana girl? Oh my God. She's another one. There's a few of them who have very loud voices and not a lot behind it. I think the thing about me is my objective is not to try to convert people. My objective is to educate people and let them decide on their own, because I feel like that's really the only way that if somebody's going to make a decision, they need to do it based on the information that they collect, and they can make their decisions that way. I don't feel like I can do anything to convince somebody else to do something. I can just provide them with information, and then they can do with that what they want.
Yeah, for sure. That's the approach I try to take with everything as well. Doesn't work out as intended always, but most of the time it's, at least in the long term, it's the better approach to take. So what are the most common misconceptions about vegan diets that you see, maybe even on the positive and on the negative side? So let's say, you can get all of your nutrients from a vegan diet, for example. And there's the other extreme that, you can't be healthy on a vegan diet. So
yeah, that's funny because I just wrote I've written like 5 articles about this for different outlets about this, because it's, comes up so much. But yeah, the ones that I hear the most is, number one, there's no such thing as a healthy vegan. And obviously, I mean, I can be N=1 right here and say that's not true based on me, and based on a lot of the vegan athletes that are out there. But that aside, if you look at the research that's currently out there, and there's not enough of it, but there's some, if you look at what is out there, a well-designed vegan diet has been shown to be as healthy, if not healthier, than a diet including meat and dairy. Just the key words are well-designed. And the problem is most people do not do it well. But a lot of research is, a lot more research is needed, but the current evidence basically says that a vegan diet can properly fuel an athlete the way an omnivorous diet can, and just a regular person. And in a lot of ways, they're healthier because generally there's lifestyle things that go along with being vegetarian or being vegan. A lot of the times, those people just live healthier lives. They tend to exercise more. They tend to eat a lot more vegetables. They tend to not smoke, things like that. So there are other lifestyle factors that go along with that. But for the most part, what it's been shown is that if you are vegetarian or vegan, you are as healthier, if not healthier, than someone who eats meat. And that is if you do it correctly, which most people don't do it correctly. And that brings you to your other point, which is people are constantly saying on the vegan side, oh, I can get everything I need from my vegan diet, and I don't have to supplement. And that is completely untrue. There are things missing. Whenever you cut something out of your diet, you will be missing things, and you have to make up for that. And there are things that you simply cannot get from plants, like B12. Cannot get it from plants. The only vegan source of B12 is nutritional yeast, which, you can use it as a, mix it into like cheese type sauces and things like that. But you can also take a supplement and things like that. So that's something that you have to do as a vegan. Another thing that is difficult to get as a vegan is omega-3 fatty acids, but not just omega-3 fatty acids, but the marine-based ones, the DHA and the EPA. Those are really important because your brain is 80% DHA, so for brain function, for eye function, for, hair and skin, and for your metabolism and your bone health and things like that, you need DHA and EPA. And you can get omega-3 fatty acids from a vegan diet. You can get it from flax seeds and chia seeds and walnuts and things like that, but you can't get the DHA and the EPA because they don't break down like that. The only place you can get DHA and EPA is from the ocean. You can get it from algae. And actually, fish get their DHA and EPA from algae. They don't naturally contain it. They get it from eating algae. So you're really just kind of cutting out the middleman when you eat an algae oil-based supplement. And the studies on those supplements is that they do increase the DHA and the EPA in the bloodstream of people who don't eat fish. So you can get it from algae, and you don't get fish burps that way. So that works out pretty well. And then another one is calcium. A lot of vegans have been shown that their bones are a little are not in as good shape as people who are omnivores. So you do have to either supplement calcium or eat foods that are fortified in it, or eat foods that are really calcium heavy. A lot of green vegetables tend to have a lot of calcium, but tend to have a lot of anti-nutrients that bind calcium, so you have to keep that in mind. Vitamin D is another one. You gotta go out in the sun, but it seems like everybody's deficient in vitamin C, according to their doctors, vitamin D, according to their doctors these days, But there is a vegan version of D3, which is the one that comes from meat usually, and it's the vegan version is grown from lichen or fungi, and they're lichen that have been sitting in the sun for a while. So they get to D3 and you can take it as a vegan. So that works out pretty well. People who are vegan and vegetarian, and especially women who are postmenopausal, they tend to be more deficient in iron. And even though in the vegan diet, their intakes are actually higher than in, the studies show that when vegans, the iron in their food is much higher than in omnivores. But the problem is that it's a type of iron that we don't absorb as well. The other good news about the vegan diet is it's really high in vitamin C. And vitamin C helps increase the absorption of the non-heme iron that we eat. The vegan diet has been recommended that you should eat around 2 times the iron that is recommended for people who are omnivores. So you do have to eat a lot more. I haven't talked about zinc. So the studies are a little confusing on the zinc, because the studies generally show that vegans are a higher risk for zinc deficiency. But it also seems like they adapt to it better. So they still have the same immune function, which zinc helps your immune. So that's something that's really interesting. But, the problem with the zinc and the iron both is that the things that block their absorption are the things that can help increase their absorption. So you can sprout and you can ferment. Also, like if you add things like garlic and onion, that can increase the zinc absorption and the iron absorption of your food. And then I think we talked about protein a little bit, and then one of the issues with protein is that, people are just like, oh, well, I eat beans and I'm fine. But the thing is that beans are not a complete protein. Beans are usually somewhere between, I think they score between like a 50 and a 70% on the PDCAAS scale, the protein quality scale. The highest quality protein is soy protein. Soy protein scores a 1, which is actually higher than some meats. And then mycoprotein is very, very high. I think it's at 99, if I'm recalling correctly. So those two are, a mycoprotein is a mushroom protein. They use it in a product called corn, Quorn. So the mushroom protein and the soy protein are the highest scoring. But everything else is, somewhere between 50 and 70. Some things are even lower than that. Quinoa is one people that like to throw around. Quinoa scores somewhere around an 80%. And so it's pretty good, but you do have to, you can't just use it alone. I usually recommend that vegans take a protein shake every day. Just kind of make sure, especially if you're an athlete, you want to have some kind of a vegan protein shake. And then you just eat a wide variety of protein containing things. I really recommend sprouting your grains, sprouting your corn, sprouting your beans, whatever you can sprout it, because it tends to allow you to get more protein. The protein quality is higher, and then the nutrient quality tends to be higher as well, so you can take in the iron and the zinc and all that stuff. So that's my spiel on nutrition.
Yeah, you've touched on quite a few of the most common nutritional concerns and nutrient deficiencies that people might experience on a vegan diet. Simply objectively speaking, if we put aside the ethical issues, it seems like a big hassle, honestly, to consider all these things when you could include red meat and eggs and liver or something like that, and then you would be set from a nutritional point of view.
It can be. It's way easier now than it's ever been. When I went vegan, it was not easy. Before I went vegan, it must have been really, really hard. But nowadays, because there's so many, more and more people kind of coming over to the vegan side, there's a lot more vegan products out there and a lot more things that are easily accessible. So that's a good thing. But yeah, it's definitely a lot more work. And that's why it has to be something you really want to do. It's not something you can just jump into lightly. But it's like any other diet that people got to jump on, like paleo or Atkins or whatever. If you're cutting things out of your diet, it is going to be more work to make sure that you get everything you need. So it's just, how bad do you want to do it?
You've mentioned that vegans in general are usually healthier than regular people because...
if they do it correctly.
Of course, that's the That's kind of the disclaimer that has to be considered throughout this whole discussion, because I talk about this and you talk about this with the idea in mind that it's a well thought out vegan diet, not just Oreos and beans or something.
Yeah, totally. A lot of people are like, they're like, oh, I used to be vegan, but it made me really sick, so I had to stop. And so the question is, well, were you doing it right? Because chances are you weren't. And a lot of people replace meat with bread, and bread is not a replacement for meat. So, things like that, or replace meat with, my sister's ex-husband actually decided to go vegetarian for a while, and he didn't eat vegetables, so it was strange. But mostly what he ate is Doritos and M&Ms. And yeah, you're probably not going to do very well on that diet.
I just wanted to mention that anytime someone goes on a diet, meaning they adapt a structured approach instead of just eating whatever it's in front of them or in their reach of hands or something, that automatically increases awareness, and probably that simply increases their nutrition quality and whole food intake probably.
I think it's really good that people are starting to pay a lot more attention to what they're putting in their bodies, even if it's, it's misinformed a lot of the time, but at least people are paying attention. That's important.
The deficiency one is interesting. Have you ever heard about Chris Masterjohn's story with his vegan experiment?
No.
Do you know who Chris is?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Yeah, so he's probably one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to nutrition, and he went on a vegan diet, I'm not sure for how long, and he essentially came up with a ton of cavities, and then he came across Weston Price's work, and he reintroduced the traditional foods that people were consuming, eggs and liver and dairy and all that kind of stuff, and his health improved. So I wouldn't suppose that he just went on a retarded vegan diet.
Yeah, who knows how he did it. But I'm guessing if he is well versed in nutrition, he probably did it well. But there is the calcium aspect, and he just may be somebody who didn't adapt well to it. Who knows? It's not for everybody.
And there are some other nutrients that came into my mind. For example, vitamin K2 and the ones found in eggs. So for example, biotin or choline. Is there any way to get those on a vegan diet?
K2, I want to say it's in prunes, if I'm not mistaken. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
And there's that fermented natto, whatever it's called.
Yeah, although natto is gross. Choline you can get from like spinach and beets. And I think, I want to say it's in whole wheat as well. Don't quote me on that. Biotin it's available in a lot of vegetarian sources. I think beans and nuts.
Honestly, I don't even know, because I don't work with full-fledged vegan people, honestly. I'm obviously not a vegan myself, so again, if you don't do this for an ethical point of view, like, to me it's not really the wisest choice to simply go abandon all. This is something that annoys me. Some people claim that, the vegan diet is the healthiest diet ever. No, it's not.
It can be if you do it right. That's what it comes down to. But, the nutrients that you just mentioned, there are vegan sources of those. Whole wheat is a good source of most of that stuff. And then beans and nuts and stuff like that. So, the ones that I mentioned are generally the ones that you can't get from a vegan diet, or you can get them, but they're not as well absorbed. But the ones that you mentioned, yeah, you can definitely get them in eggs and meat and things like that. But there are also vegetarian sources that you can get them from. So it's not too hard to do that. But, I think really almost everybody has some kind of a imbalance in their diet if they're not paying attention, even omnivores. Oh, you know what I didn't mention is creatine. Most vegans don't get any creatine in their diet. And while it's not, a required nutrient, it is something that I recommend everybody take.
Yeah, so it's definitely possible to cover your nutritional needs if you use supplements, but it's just going to take a lot more work. So I think we covered the protein intake aspect, but someone asked what are your thoughts on meat substitutes, and you've mentioned, for example, mycoprotein and soy, and there are the other ones like texture vegetable protein. This one actually was brought into my attention by a friend who is a vegan, and he said to me I could use it as a replacement for my cottage cheese, which I'm not really inclined to switch my cottage cheese with textured vegetable protein.
I don't know if I would eat that instead of cottage cheese. You can make vegan cottage cheese out of tofu. I've done it before. But I'm not a big cottage cheese person, so I don't really care.
So what are your thoughts on these meat substitutes overall?
Look, I don't have a problem with them. A lot of people have a problem with them. They complain about them, whatever. One question that people ask a lot is, well, why would you want to make something that tastes like meat if you don't want to eat meat? And the fact of the matter is, most of us didn't stop eating meat because we don't like meat. We stopped eating meat because we don't want to kill anything. So we don't care if it tastes like meat. It actually is kind of nice to have some variety in your diet. We just don't have the desire to have anything die for it. Some of it is certainly significantly more chemical and processed than others. But I don't really have a problem with vegan substitutes. I use them a fair amount. There are some that I like more than others. I use them to add texture and flavor to food. Some of them are great sources of protein, depending on the kind. And they're getting better and better all the time, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it at all. But I know a lot of people do.
What do you think about using soy as a main protein source? Because it has good amino acid profile, but there is that whole concern with the estrogen content and
most of that is bullshit. Most of the studies done on soy that demonstrate anything like that have been done on animals, not on humans. So there is that to be considered. And the studies that have been done on humans, just for the most part, just don't show that. And the amount of soy that you would need to cause a problem is astronomical and way more phytonutrients than anybody would get in a normal day if they ate. So even if they ate a fair amount of soy, it's way more phytonutrients than you would ever eat in a day. It's really bullshit. But the way I see it is, if you do not want to eat soy, or you don't feel good when you eat soy, then don't eat soy. But for most people, it's really not going to cause a problem.
Yeah, and it thickens up nicely. For 2 years or so, I used the soy protein supplement because I didn't have money to buy whey. Funny one. And funny times, and it just tasted like ass.
Yeah, it doesn't taste great. I don't eat soy protein on its own. Soy protein and pea protein, the taste is just awful. Most of the supplements that I take are pea protein, but it's mixed with other stuff, and so I'm somehow able to choke it down, but it's just not that tasty. But I just can't do soy protein. It's so beany. But I do like, I use tofu and I use soy meats sometimes, and things like that. It really doesn't bother me.
I had a client who complained about having to drink chocolate whey shakes, and I told him that he had no idea how well that tasted compared to some of the products I took throughout my years.
Oh, totally. The search for a good tasting vegan protein shake is long and arduous.
Yeah, I can imagine. So regardless if someone includes animal products or not, we should all be eating a ton of vegetables. For yourself, do you favor organic or conventional produce? And does it matter to you if it's locally grown or not?
From an environmental standpoint, and most of the time from a taste standpoint, locally grown produce and seasonably grown produce just tastes better, and is obviously uses fewer fossil fuels, things like that. So as a general rule, I try to stick with that. But it's not always feasible, and we're very fortunate to live in a world where we can get produce from all over the world. But as a general rule, I try to do local as much as possible.
And what about organic versus conventional produce?
The organic thing is kind of bullshit. That's been shown. I do buy organic foods, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that they are necessarily better than non-organic foods. From a perspective of not wanting to have more pesticides on my foods, that's generally why I do it. But actually, organic foods aren't always pesticide free. A lot of the pesticides used in nearby farms gets blown on them and things like that. So when it comes down to it, you just do what you can do. But I don't always buy organic. I don't really believe that organic is better, and there's a lot of data to support me on that.
Yeah, and organic definitely uses pesticides too, and those can be less efficacious than conventional ones, so you have to use more of them. So it's a messy issue. What about the environment? Because I was listening to a podcast with someone that said, well, organic is better than conventional for the environment, and that goes against what I've seen.
I think the jury's still out on that. I've seen a lot of data that says that is not the case. I've seen some data that says that is true. It's kind of hard for me to say right now. I just try to stick with locally grown and, ideally places that I know where my food is coming from, and then I don't worry about it so much.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I try to do as well. So how excited are you about the prospect of soon being able to consume lab-grown meat?
I'm excited that they're doing it. I think that is a huge step in the right direction. I think it's going to cut way down on factory farming. But, it has been so long since I've had meat, I do not crave it, and I'm not sure that I want to eat it at this point. But I'm not ethically opposed to it at all. I mean, well, of course, it depends on how they obtain the cells. I would hope that they would obtain the cells in a way that doesn't harm any animals. But other than that, I think it's going to save a lot of lives. I think that's fantastic. I don't know that I will partake, but I am 100% supportive of it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. And honestly, if it looks like meat and it tastes like meat and it has the amino acids and the nutrients and all that,
yeah, then who cares, right? Chances are if it's grown in a lab, it's probably going to be better for you than meat that's not grown in a lab, just because it's going to be free of a lot of contaminants.
there's that too. And let's say if they took a muscle fiber and from an animal, and that's not invasive, because we do that to humans all the time. We take biopsies. So what do you think about the other protein sources that are coming up? For example, I've seen this in I think in a Joe Rogan video, reptilianism. So essentially you would eat crocodiles and stuff, because apparently those don't.
I don't know anything about that. But hell, look, if there's a reason why they want to do that, or even if there's not, look, I don't judge people based on their food choices, because not everybody has my morality. And so as far as I'm concerned, if what you're doing is working for you, then I have no problem with it. I would love it if everyone in the world went vegan, but that's not my objective. It's not my objective to make everybody in the world vegan. I'm very supportive of whatever's working for you.
What about insect protein?
Go for it. Why not, right? If it works for you, I wouldn't do it, of course, but if it works for you. When I was in Thailand, I saw lots of the street vendors selling insects, and it's a major source of protein in a lot of countries in the world, and I think it's sustainable, probably way more sustainable than cows. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there's a huge community issue, I guess, or simply growing up, you're not used to that kind of food. So I would find it difficult to imagine that it, at least in the next decade or something, it would be widespread in Europe, for example, because we are not used to that.
Yeah, and people have been brought up to believe that insects are gross and everything, but really, it is a much more sustainable form of protein. So I'm more supportive of that than I am of beef, really, from an environmental standpoint. And from an ethical standpoint, ethics, I don't know. I don't know if insects, I'm not sure about the sentience of insects. I haven't done a lot of research on it. But if they feel pain, then it bothers me. If they're feeling tortured, then it bothers me. But from an environmental standpoint, then yeah, absolutely. It's way better than beef.
Great. So I think we covered this topic. We went through a lot of stuff, and there's a lot for people to chew on, pun intended. So are there any final thoughts, messages you would like to leave people with? Final summary or something?
Don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole and eat what you want to eat and call it a day. That's pretty much it. That's my message, is if you're going to try to spread dogma, make sure you're doing it in an intelligent and fact-based method, and not just trying to terrify people or make fun of people or anything like that, because I sure as hell don't like it when people on the other side, make assumptions about me based on my diet. And so I think it's really important for people to just let things be, get educated, and let people do what they're going to do, as long as they're not hurting themselves or anybody else. I think it's fine.
Brilliant. Just got reminded we haven't touched on your book at all. So please tell us what the book is about, because you've mentioned previously that your disdain with the whole emotional blackmailing was partially what got you into writing it.
Well, yeah, the whole reason I wrote the book was because there wasn't anything out there that wasn't cherry-picked and that wasn't biased. And I just felt like it was time to put unbiased information out there and let people make educated choices. And then I wanted to throw in recipes that I really enjoy, because I feel like they're recipes that anyone would like, even people who eat meat. So then they have options. So if they want to have a meat-free Monday, and maybe it'll make people eat less meat, and that'll be great, So if they want to have a meat-free Monday and they make something from my book, fantastic. I tried to make things as simple as possible, and tried to give options for people who don't want to eat soy, or people who don't want to eat meat substitutes. I tried to give options for that. And then I tried to use ingredients that were relatively easy to come by. And, my photographs are not artwork. They're not beautiful. I kind of did that by design, because that's in my kitchen. That's what food looks like. It doesn't look like what you'd get in a restaurant. And I think most people's kitchens, it doesn't look like what you get in a restaurant. So I just try to be real with my facts and real with my food. So that was the whole thing.
Awesome. And I'm sure there will be many people who would want to check out your book after they listen to this podcast, and I will make sure to link it in the description so they can find it easily.
Thank you.
So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what are the social media accounts they can find you?
I'm very Facebookable. I'm all over Facebook. And I'm on Instagram at 5 Feet of Fury 1. I think it's 5FT of Fury 1. And I am YouTubeable at, I think it's the same thing as my Instagram. I think it's at 5 Feet of Fury 1. And I'm on Twitter, which I want to say is also at 5 Feet of Fury 1 or something like that. But anyway, if you look up my name, I'm pretty much the only Melody Schoenfeld on the planet, as far as I can tell.
Awesome. That's always nice if you have a name that's uncommon and can be easily found. And you're not just the 50 millionth John Smith.
Exactly. Well, I changed my name from John Smith to Melody Schoenfeld, so that worked out well for me.
Awesome. With that, I would like to ask you the final question that I always like to end these episodes on, and that is simply, what is your definition of success?
My definition of success, I would say, if you are happy and comfortable, then you have succeeded. So if you're happy with your life and you're comfortable in your lifestyle, then you have succeeded.
Awesome. And I think this relates perfectly to our topic. If you are comfortable with the decisions you make, then that's great.
Yeah, most of my life has been very uncomfortable in order to get me where I am, but I'm very happy. But I have a roof over my head and I'm not starving and I'm doing good. So
whether someone will decide to adopt a vegan lifestyle or not, I'm sure they will find ton of value in this discussion, and I hope they will start eating more fruits and vegetables, because that's never a bad thing.
It's never a bad thing, and I would hope so, because what's been really cool is that people who I did not expect to buy my book have been buying my book, and a lot of them have added a meatless night or have said, I don't want to go vegan, but I think I'm going to cut way down, and that's been really cool. It's really cool to see people who I didn't expect to make those kinds of decisions to actually be making them.
Yeah, I have a ton of days when I don't eat meat at all, due to other reasons. Usually it's simply time restraint or laziness to cook. But if someone, even if they simply start, if they buy a book and find more and better ways to cook vegetables, I think that's a great step towards better health.
Absolutely. If you just realize that vegan food isn't just salads and lentils, then that's great.
Awesome. And with that, I think we'll end this episode. So I would like to thank you a lot for coming on.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and I'm glad we were able to tackle this highly sensitive topic in a chill and evidence-based manner. So
in a civil fashion.
Exactly, without any ad hominems and calling each other names. So that's great.
Nobody's punched anybody, so it worked out.
Okay, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, man. Take care.
And that was episode 11 of the Muscle Engineer podcast with Melody Schoenfeld. As you could hear, a vegan and a meat eater can have a sane and rational conversation, so I hope this provides a good example of how discourses should occur between people with different dietary choices. I also hope you found the episode valuable and learned something from it. As always, I'd appreciate if you would share it with a friend and left me a review on iTunes. So with that out of the way, let's get into the usual key take-home points I like to end the episodes on. First key message is around the proper way you should approach the conversation with someone who you're trying to expose to a new idea or change their beliefs or anything like that, especially when it comes to such an emotionally loaded topic such as veganism. And we touched on this in episode 1 of the podcast with Danny Lennon, so check that out if you want to go in depth on the proper way to communicate. In any case, if you're trying to convince someone to change their mind, shaming them and making them feel like a bad person is really not a good approach to take. And I would love if we stop judging people based on the dietary choices or what foods they choose to eat or not to eat. This whole dietary tribalism is retarded and has to stop if you want to have any chance of communicating with each other. The second key point is to be very clear on why you want to go on a vegan diet. Ideally, it shouldn't be because you watched What the Health or any other shockumentary and got scared. If you didn't get the message so far, I'm telling you right now, What the Health is rubbish. And so are most food documentaries. If you want a good one, Food Evolution is actually science-based and highly recommended. But I digress. If you're simply trying to improve your health, going full vegan isn't the best idea either. I don't care what anyone says. Complete veganism isn't the best diet ever for anyone really with perhaps some small exceptions, let alone for everyone. In fact, there isn't any universal best diet for everyone, but there are some dietary patterns that are more health promoting than others, and certainly including more plants is a good idea for most people. But that doesn't require you to completely abandon animal products altogether. In my opinion, the only valid reason to go full vegan is if you have ethical issues with consuming animal products, which is totally fine and a decision I completely respect, as long as you keep point number 1 in mind. But other than that, I see no reason to completely avoid all animal products, which brings me to point number 3. A vegan diet can be just as healthy as an omnivorous diet if you set it up correctly, which can be a big pain in the ass, pun intended again. Like Melody mentioned, there are a lot of nutrients you don't get in optimal amounts from plants, and you have to be both very meticulous with your food selection and use a wide variety of supplements. A hassle that is certainly worth going through if you have ethical reasons behind your choices. But again, if that's not the case, simply including eggs, organ meats, some dairy, some red meat here and there would fix all those nutrient issues and potentially offer other health benefits that we are not yet aware of. Plus, there is the whole individual genetic response that I highlighted with Chris Masterjohn's vegan experiment, and that I will be discussing in an upcoming episode with Børge Fagerli. But until then, I think I've gone on long enough, so I'll end it here. Take some time and digest all the information we presented here and let me know what you thought. Until next week, take care.